Okay, in lesson 8, we're going to look at distance on the coordinate plane, and we're going to start with a real-life example. So this says 4 friends are touring on motorcycles. They come to an intersection of 2 roads. The roads they are on continue straight, and the other is perpendicular to it. We'll see what that looks like when we draw a model. The sign at the intersection shows the distances to several towns. Draw a map or diagram of the roads and use it and the information on the sign to answer the following questions. So I'm going to start by drawing the road that I'm coming from. So here I come on my motorcycle, and I come to my intersection. So there I'm going to represent the intersection with a dot. On the sign up here, it tells me that Albertsville is 8 miles to the left. So I'm just going to continue that road. So the road that it said we were on, we're going straight. We're at the intersection. It continues straight. And then there was a perpendicular road to it. Perpendicular would be like this. It forms right angles. That's what perpendicular means. So 8 miles to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is Albertsville. Blossville is 3 miles ahead. Cheyenne is 12 miles ahead. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Here's Cheyenne. And then Dewey Falls is 6 to the right. Oops. Okay, so now it's asking for me to find the distance between Albertsville and Dewey Falls. So to go from here to here. So I'm going all this distance, or that 8 miles, and then I'm going to go another 6 miles. So to find the distance between those, I would take that 8 and add it to that 6. The distance between Blossville and Cheyenne, so to go from here to here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 miles. So remember, Cheyenne was 12 and Blossville was 3. So in this case, I'm actually going to subtract them to find they're 9 miles apart. The reason we add for 1 and subtract for 1 is because of where they are in location to myself. So notice Albertsville and Dewey Falls are on opposite sides of me. So since they're on opposite sides of me, I would want to add their distances from me together to find how far apart they are from one another. But Blossville and Cheyenne are on the same side of me. They're both in front of me. So since they're both in front of me, to find their distance from each other, I would have to subtract how far they are from me to see how far apart they are. So this was our 3, and this was our 12. So it all has to do with how far they are in relation to myself. So on the coordinate plane, and if you'll notice, this diagram we've drawn looks just like the coordinate plane. And this would be me right here. And they're asking what represents that intersection of the 2 roads, or where I am. And hopefully we all remember that's called the origin. Okay, so what is happening here is we really have to look at the numbers. Albertsville, if it's to my left, would be a -8, and Dewey Falls to my right would be a +6. Since they're opposite sides of me, I'm going to add them together. But I'm not adding a -8 and a +6. I'm adding their distance from me together. We can think of this as the distance they are from 0, which is absolute value. So really, I'm taking the absolute value of Albertsville, the absolute value of Dewey Falls, and adding them together. I'm adding them together because the numbers are opposites, or they're on opposite sides of me. So, if the numbers are opposite, we add their absolute values. So if the signs are different signs, we add their their absolute values. I always think of this as different has a D in it, add has 2 D's in it. So if they have different signs, we add their absolute values. With Blossville, if this were a coordinate plane, this would be a +3, and Cheyenne would be a +12. In this case, they have the same sign. They're both positive. So we subtracted their absolute values. So once again, we're still looking at absolute value. In this case, we would want to write it where the greater absolute value would come first. So if they have the same sign, we subtract their absolute values. And I think of this, same starts with S for subtract. So if you're looking to find the distance between 2 points on the coordinate plane, you first look at the signs with the numbers. If they have different signs, a positive and a negative, you're going to add the absolute values of those two numbers together. If they have the same sign, meaning they're both positive, or they could both be negative, we didn't see that in this example, but they could be, we would subtract their absolute values. We would want the absolute value of the greater absolute value to come first. Okay, so let's look at some more examples. So, using this idea, we're looking at the distance between -4, 0, and 5, 0. So it asks us, what do the ordered pairs have in common, and what does that mean about their location on the coordinate plane? Okay, so what do they have in common, and what does that mean about their location on the coordinate plane? Well, I'm just going to draw a coordinate plane so we can kind of look at this and see how the trick will help us. So -4, 0 means I would go over to -4 and up 0. 5, 0 means I would go over to +5 and up 0. So we can see that they both have the same y coordinate. Okay, so they both have the same y. If we look at their x, we can see their x coordinates are opposites, -4, +5. So one's to the left of the origin, one's to the right. So this is just like me standing here and having Albertsville to my left and Dewey Falls to my right. When that happened, we took the distance they both were from me and added them together. So what I look at is I find the one that they have in common. So the y coordinate is the same, and I cross it off. I'm not looking at the one they have in common. So then I look at the other two. I have a -4 and a +5. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the absolute value of both of these numbers. And if I notice I have a negative and a positive, that means different signs. And remember we said different signs means add their absolute values. Different and add both have D in it. So I'm going to find their absolute values and then add them together. So the absolute value of -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 from 0. The absolute value of +5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from 0. So 4 plus 5 means they're 9 units apart. Okay, so since the -4 and the +5 have different signs, we add their absolute values. Looking at another example, and I'm going to kind of skip over some of this and just show you the shortcut. So in this one I have 0, -6 and 0, -11. So what I do is I find the one they have in common. They both have an a 0 in their x coordinate. So I'm going to cross that one off. I'm not going to look at that. The other two numbers, -6 and -7, have the same sign. Since they have the same sign, I'm going to subtract their absolute values. I want to put the number that's going to have the larger absolute value first, and hopefully we all know that -11 will have a larger absolute value than -6. The absolute value of negative 11 is positive 11, and the absolute value of negative 6 is positive 6. So since they were both negative, I'm going to subtract their absolute values. 11 minus 6 tells me they're 5 units apart. Okay, so now we're going to look at ones that don't lie on the axis. So again, I'm just going to kind of do the shortcut method with you. And then we're going to kind of go back a little bit and talk about whether they're horizontal or vertical lines that would connect the two. So I'm looking at these 2 points, negative 3, 3, and negative 3, negative 5. They both have a negative 3 in the x coordinate. Since they both have that, I'm going to cross them out. The y coordinates, one is positive, one is negative. So they're different signs, which means I'm going to add their absolute values. Okay, so I will find the absolute value of 3, add it to the absolute value of negative 5. 3 plus 5 tells me they're 8 units apart. Now, one thing I didn't address with the other problems is whether or not they're horizontal or vertical. And that all has to do with which coordinate they have in common. So if I were to graph these two, negative 3, positive 3 would go here. Negative 3, negative 5 would go here. This is a vertical line, goes up and down. So if I were to connect them, it would be vertical. If we look at the 2 points, their x coordinates are the same. I can look at the letter x like this. If their x coordinates are the same, it makes a vertical line. Notice that the letter x has the letter v in it. Okay, so if the x coordinates are the same, they form a vertical line. I'm going to go back to example 2. I'm going to go back to example 1. In this one, they had the y coordinates the same. So if we draw this again, we have negative 4, 0 would be here. 5, 0, as we saw before, was here. So this makes a horizontal. Now, if you look at the letter y, which is the coordinate they both have in common, the letter y, if you flip it upside down, it kind of looks like the letter h for horizontal. That's how I remember it. Okay, sorry, jumping ahead. Now you'll see that there are some notes here that you can use to help you with this. So to find the distance between 2 points, you're going to cross off that similar coordinate, so the number that they both have in common in the same spot. You're going to look at the coordinates that are different. If the coordinates have the same sign, they're both positive or they're both negative, you're going to subtract their absolute values. If the coordinates have different sign, one is positive, one is negative, you're going to add their absolute values. To determine if it's vertical or horizontal, you're going to look at the similar coordinates. So you're going to look at the one they have in common. If the one they have in common is the x coordinate, it's going to make a vertical line. X, V, vertical. If the similar coordinates are the y coordinates, it's a horizontal line. So here's my y. If I flip my y upside down, it makes that horizontal, or the H for horizontal.